Today we're going to talk about how to memorise a dressage test. I've got here the Novice 2-2 as an example, and I might use that as a reference, but this is how I like to memorise my dressage tests, and these are a few things to keep in mind. So generally all tests are mirrored. What you do on the left rein, you will eventually have to go and do on the right rein. And generally it's the same in trot as in canter. You know, you do it on one side in trot, then you go and do the same thing on the other side, then you'll go into your canter movements, you'll do one thing on one side, and then you'll have to go and do it on the other side. And then the other thing is that the trot movements are usually first, and then the canter movements are usually second. So if you keep that in mind, that's one way to approach your tests. And if you ever get stuck, I've often, you know, especially in the early days, I would get part way through and I would literally, my mind would go blank and I would forget where I was. And if that ever happened, I'd usually come to a halt. I would keep the horse in frame, stay on my line, and hopefully what I was meant to be doing would come back to me. And and so I would generally try and think, have I done all the trot movements? Are we up to the canter movements? I'm halfway through trot. Do I now need to go and do that on the other side? So if you do get stuck in your test, that's what you want to keep in mind. Okay, so you've got the trot movements first, the canter movements second. In the middle, there'll be a long rein walk. And then in the second half, there'll also be a stretchy trot. Now that's generally for the prelim tests or training if you're watching from the US, and then novice through to advanced, that's the general rule. All tests, you go in, you enter at A and you halt at X, so that's like something you don't even have to remember. And then the last movement of the test is down the centre line, and it's just a matter of remembering where you have to halt. But don't worry, tests have been won and lost because a rider halted at X and they're meant to halt at G, or vice versa. Now, I've made every mistake that I mention here, so don't think that you're the only one. Don't think that you're going to make a fool of yourself, because I've already done it, and I tell you what, there are thousands and thousands of other people who've also done it. Now, all tests start with a lengthen or medium trot as the second or third movement. So you've gone in, you've halted, you turn left or right at C, and then you either lengthen trot or you've got a medium trot. And that is the general rule. That's what I expect of all the tests, except in prelim. Okay, so the only thing you need to know is what way you turn at C once you've gone in. And when I'm warming up and getting ready for my test, that's what I like to know. When you're about to go into your test, don't panic that you don't know it all. All you need to know is what way you turn at C, and you can even be a bit sneaky and write it on your wrist. I know riders who do that, so there's nothing, you know, embarrassing about that. And then for me, I learn the tests in two parts. So I will learn the trot movements first, and that's usually the first half, and then I'll go and learn the canter movements second. It doesn't usually matter which one I learn first. It depends on the horse, depends where they're at, and all of that. Sometimes I learn the trot stop first, just because that's the first part of the test, and you know, if you can get through the first half of the test without forgetting anything, then you know you've done really well. So for me, I'll learn the first half, and then I'll go and practice just that half, and I do it up to the long rein walk. So I'll practice that at home for a week or so, and then I'll go and learn the canter movements, and then I'll go and practice just the canter movements at home. And then when I'm feeling really confident in both of the halves, I'll put it together and practice the whole thing all as one at home. And then I usually like to be able to do that for at least a week before the competition. If I'm moving up a level, I like to make sure I can put the two halves together, you know, at least once at home before I enter. Sometimes I'll even just do the trot and then do the canter separately, and you know, that's good enough for me. You know, I know that I can get through the rest of it. But my advice to someone who's just starting out, or who's just going into, you know, a new level for the first time, is make sure you've ridden it at home at least once and you're reasonably comfortable. You know, you don't have to be fabulous, but be reasonably comfortable. You're going to remember it, and you can get through most of it before moving up. And that's a good indication that you'd be ready enough to do that test at a low level, or you know, at a quiet show. So that's how I like to learn the test. That's how I memorize my tests. And if you take those rules that I mentioned at the beginning, that should be a great way to remember the test once you're in there. My last little tip is not to panic. If you're in the ring and you've forgotten what you're doing, don't panic. And I know that sounds really hard, but for me, if I ever forgot what I was doing, I'd just take the next diagonal. And you know what? About half the time I was right. And then a few strides in, I would remember what I was doing and I could keep going and not lose the flow. So for me, getting lost in tests is not a panic event. It's just something, you know, I would completely relax my body. I would take a breath in, and as part of all that, my brain would just, you know, relax, make sure there's nothing in your brain. My brain would relax and the next movement would often come to me and I'd be right. In saying that, I've made lots of errors where the judge has had to bell me and I have had to stop and find out where I was going. There's nothing wrong with that. People do it all the time. I hope these ideas help you memorize your next dressage test. I'll see you next time.